Role-playing games in the 1980s and the early 90s were a peculiar bunch. The genre we know today was not well established. Instead, consumers at the time were gifted with a plethora of experimental titles, toying with many novel ideas. Some of those ideas have become genre norms, while many others have since then been abandoned. Much of the experimentation was a consequence of the medium's youth, but so too were the machines they operated on. Personal computers had only just been introduced to the general consumer in the 1970s, and along with them came an incredible price tag. For example, the Apple II in the 1970s could cost a consumer nearly $1,200. In today's dollars, that would cost you over $6,100. Top-of-the-line computers today cost much less than that. But with the arrival of personal computers, computing became more widely available to the general public, or at least those who had access to them, or more accurately, those who could afford them, and gave young programmers the opportunity to grab from their imaginations to digital worlds lands of wizardry, dragons, and knights. Many developers looked to Lord of the Rings or Dungeons & Dragons, both serving as inspirations for their new worlds of fantasy. One such developer who drew from these inspirations was John Van Caneghem, who developed the Might&magic series, the subject of our video. Might&magic's historical importance tends to be overlooked, not one of the more well-remembered role-playing series like Final Fantasy or Ultima. Its name is largely kept alive by its more popular spin-off series, Heroes of Might&magic. But the mainline series played an important role in furthering the genre as a whole, providing us with an early template for later open-world titles. Open-world adventures make up a fair lot of the AAA space today, sporting the non-linearity that so many gamers crave, with a focus on exploration and self-discovery. While many games have been cited throughout history to have contributed to this space, such as the Elder Scrolls franchise, Might&magic served as an even older precursor to this formula. The series has been around since 1986, starting with The Secret of the Inner Sanctum, and while it never quite reached the fame of some of its contemporaries, the series has kept trucking on, spanning nearly 40 titles as of 2025. That's nearly 4 decades of continual releases, far outliving some of its counterparts and outpacing a number of entries to other more popular franchises. Although it started as a grid-based crawler, over the years the series has gone on to explore several genres. Heroes was mentioned earlier, and served as the series' first spin-off, a strategy RPG hybrid released in 1995. But the mainline series kept generating new releases for much of the 90s, and by the end of the 90s the franchise began to branch out. In 1999, we got a third-person action-adventure called Crusaders of Might&magic that was lukewarmly received. And in the early 2000s, we were gifted with the strangest entry yet, an online shooter dubbed Legends of Might&magic, fashioned as some kind of medieval take on Counter-Strike. It failed to impress many. And in the mid-2000s, Arcane Studios, famous for Dishonored and Prey, even developed a Might&magic game called Dark Messiah, a first-person action-adventure role-playing game. The game was praised by both fans and critics alike, and plenty of YouTube fan videos today have been made in honor of it. However, despite the franchise's mixed results of its spin-offs, its mainline series and Heroes are still well regarded. While the franchise doesn't produce new entries as frequently as it once did, new releases still continue to this day, although they tend to be part of the Heroes series. In fact, the newest entry is a prequel to the first Heroes of Might&magic called Olden Era. While several studios have had their hands on the franchise, it's New World Computing that handcrafted the classics that were so successful in their time. This review will be telling not only the origin story of New World Computing, but also where the entire series began, tracing the 40-year history back to the mid-1980s, when Secret of the Inner Sanctum was released to the world. But before we jump into Might&magic, I think it would be important to go over briefly at least a few of its integral forebears, Wizardry and Ultima. After all, Might&magic exists because they exist, and more broadly, so does nearly every role-playing game that has followed in our wake. In September of 1981, Wizardry was released on the Apple II, developed by Andrew C. Greenberg and Robert Woodhead. The game was incredibly successful, selling 24,000 copies in its first year, and in the first 3 years it sold over 200,000 copies. and critics loved the game, citing it as a complex and challenging dungeon diving experience loaded with fast-paced combat. It was heralded by one critic in Space Gamer magazine as a leap forward in computer design and the best D&D style computer game out there. And just 3 months prior, the first Ultima was released, produced by Richard Garriott and Ken Arnold. While Wizardry was strictly a wireframe dungeon crawl, Ultima provided adventuring not just in damp dungeons, but also across a multivariate landscape, populated with fields of grass and mountains and oceans. Its combination of different perspectives, from an eagle's perch to a first-person dungeon crawl, had a massive influence in the market. The game went on to sell 20,000 copies in its first year. Both of these games made 1981 a big year in video game history, and their impact was felt immediately in the succeeding years. Their DNA was foundational to a particular era most famously referred to as the Golden Age of RPGs, an era that breathed life into a beleaguered video game market whose console brethren had suffered a sterling blow from the video game crash in 1983. By the mid to late 80s, role-playing games were on a momentous upswing, with constant classics being generated, such as the extremely popular Bard's Tale released in 1985, or Dungeon Master released in 1987, and of course, Might&magic, its first one released in 1986 and its sequel in 1988. Both Wizardry and Ultima had a particular effect on the Japanese market as well. From 1986 to 1990, a slew of new franchises were born, famous examples being Dragon Quest, Fire Emblem, and Final Fantasy. It was an era packed with critical releases, and the first Might&magic games were no exception, themselves being particular standouts. By the end of the decade, they were considered some of the best role-playing games available. The early titles were important for helping to establish several norms, earning their place among the greats as instrumental to the genre's evolution. The first in the series, Secret of the Inner Sanctum, impressed critics and gamers so much that it generated enough success to put sole creator John Van Caneghem and his fledgling company, New World Computing, on the map, becoming a household name. Secrets of the Inner Sanctum was Van Caneghem's first game, but despite it being his first foray into video game development, he came out swinging big. For the 80s, this was a large game, with a large world, and it offered a copious amount of locations, monsters, and spells. It was a game that pushed boundaries in size and scope, becoming one of the largest role-playing games among its contemporaries. But Might&magic's story doesn't start with the first game. Instead, it starts with Van Caneghem himself. Van Caneghem grew up on the Sunset Strip of Los Angeles. Born in the 1960s, he came into an era when computers still largely resided in the basements of universities, and gaming meant gathering around a chess or a checkers board. His journey to computer development started with playing such games like chess, before moving on to more complicated games like Diplomacy and Risk. Later, like many would-be developers of his day, he turned to tabletop RPGs, spending his weekends with friends exploring fantasy worlds and crafting characters of their own. In fact, one of Van Caneghem's D&D characters, Crag the Hack, even became a default character option in the first Might&magic. Van Caneghem certainly had the advantages of a privileged childhood. He attended an expensive French private school located in the west side of Los Angeles. His stepfather was a successful physician whose own profession would become instrumental to Van Caneghem's initial career choice. According to Van Caneghem in an interview in 2017 with XRDS magazine, his parents wanted him to pursue a conservative path, medicine. Although Van Caneghem had little desire for becoming a doctor, he enrolled as a pre-med student in 1979 at UCLA. However, during his time at UCLA, he became increasingly disinterested in medicine, his interest drifting more towards computer science and math. He eventually reached a breaking point. In the same interview with XRDS, he goes on to explain his plight. "Eventually, I just said no. I can't do it. I can't go down this path," he recalled, adding, "I was always good at math and fascinated with computer science, so I just tore to those fields instead, got addicted to them, and decided to make the switch." Like many developers of his generation, he picked up an Apple II and taught himself computer programming. During his years in college, he spent his free time playing Wizardry and Ultima, both series laying a foundation for his own soon-to-be creation. One day, he woke up with a revelation. He exclaims in XRDS that he knew that he wanted to make a video game. After graduating, he moved back home in 1984, where he founded his first company, New World Computing, and began the development of his first video game, Might&magic, The Secret of the Inner Sanctum. But any game requires money, so Van Caneghem turned to his parents, who co-signed on a bank loan. He received an additional $70,000 from inheritance. With money in hand and a place to live and work, he began development, teaching himself assembly code 6502 along with other game design priorities. Although his parents were willing to support him for a few years, they eventually grew impatient, concerned his new hobby will result in chronic unemployment. According to an interview with the Daily News in 1996, the entire production time took about 2.5 years. And by the end, Van Caneghem had moved out and was no longer speaking with his parents. Van Caneghem had an issue though: distribution. He needed a partner to help distribute the product to the consumers. He doesn't mention the company's name, but he did find a willing suitor. However, their offer was outrageous, and Van Caneghem couldn't accept their terms. They were only willing to give him a return of $1 per copy sold. He goes on to explain, "I was just a crazy kid out of college who wasn't going to hear no from anybody. I was going to see my dream come true. So I took out a phone number in my apartment, bought out an ad on the back of a magazine, and started selling them myself. Forget the publisher guys. I was going to sell it straight to the customers." In an interview with Matt Barton, Van Caneghem notes with the help of a few people he knew, he was able to put a package together, had been advertised in several magazines including Computer Gaming World and A+, and took orders over the phone himself. For a period, Van Caneghem had discussed a partnership with Origin Systems, who had just done Ultima 4, to see if they would be their publisher. But Van Caneghem was already waist deep with product distribution, and so nothing serious formed. But the hard work did pay off, and he sold 5,000 copies in the first month. Orders became so overwhelming that he needed a better solution. Mark Caldwell, New World Computing's first employee, notes in an interview with Ziggurat that EA had a partner affiliate program, and Activision had developed their own to catch up. New World Computing took advantage of this new program, and in 1987 became one of Activision's first affiliate partners. With the power of Activision's marketing department behind them, sales shot through the roof, ballooning to 150,000. For the time, this was a massive success. The company's success also necessitated a better working space than Van Caneghem's apartment. The studio moved into a small 3-room office building behind Sherwin-Williams in Sherman Oaks, where they prepped and packaged the product themselves. With the success of the Apple II release, opportunity for expansion to other systems arose. New ports were released for many systems over the years, dating into the 1990s. In 1987, Might&magic found its way onto the Commodore 64, and a DOS version was developed for IBM systems, and a series of Japanese systems saw ports as well, such as the FM7, PC-88, the PC-98, the X68000, and the MSX. In 1988, a monochrome version for Might&magic was released for the Macintosh. In the early 90s, the most graphically impressive variants of the game were released for both the NES and TurboGrafx. And the critical response was incredibly positive. In Computer Gaming World, the famous, or infamous depending on who you ask, Scorpia highly recommended the adventure. She cited its difficulty in the beginning as one of the few sticking points, but otherwise complimented it as a refreshing experience. She lauded its quest for its uniqueness, a mix of both combat and puzzles, as a journey for knowledge rather than one set on defeating a stereotypical evil wizard. Dragon Magazine in 1987 highly recommended the game for its gratuitous size and adventure. Secret of the Inner Sanctum was a much bigger game than its contemporaries at the time, sporting 55 areas to explore, 13 dungeons, 6 castles, 9 caves, and 20 outdoor areas. The magazine called Might&magic one of the top 5 games to ever be produced for a computer, stating, "This adventure is awesome in its scope, completely fascinating, graphically pleasing." They also rated the Macintosh and IBM versions highly in later issues in 1988. Compute magazine also loved the game, stating, "Might&magic is an outstanding adventure game. This new release has the potential to take its place alongside The Bard's Tale and Wizard's Crown among the best in the genre." The game became so popular and well respected that by 1988, Computer Gaming World entered it into their Hall of Fame, alongside the likes of Bard's Tale, Ultima 4 and 3, and Wizardry. It was without a doubt one of the most popular hits of its era, and impressed critics of its sheer size, originality, and puzzles. Might&magic saw a total of 14 ports, a number of which look quite similar, whereas others departed quite dramatically from the original. In all, there's about 7 different versions of Might&magic across a multitude of systems. While there's some gameplay elements that differ, the biggest differences between most are aesthetic. We will cover the bulk of these later and instead discuss the Apple II, DOS, and Commodore 64 versions now. Primarily because of the DOS port from good old games that I first played to completion, and also because the differences between the Western versions, save for the Macintosh, are rather slight. Both the Commodore 64 and DOS versions largely copy the Apple II. The Japanese ports we will discuss later, since those versions tend to differ greatly from their Western counterparts. Might&magic's graphics are nothing worth gawking at. Limited by what the Apple II could produce, as a result, players received an otherwise serviceable experience. The game sports the famous color blurriness common for Apple II games, a noted effect of artifact coloring, which was the method Apple used to produce colors utilizing an NTSC signal also known as color burst. A consequence of this method was the blurriness I mentioned, also known as color fringe, which we can see on full display here. Though with color artificing, the Apple II was able to produce more colors, up to 16. Might&magic makes use of a fair lot of available colors. We have orangish mountains, forests of green and brown, teal-colored snow, orange for the desert, and green for the marshlands. To imitate 3D, the world is constructed with 2D panels, of which we have few in variety, making for a rather redundant reality, but more varied than Bard's Tale Skara Brae or the city in Ultimate Reality, and certainly an improvement over the wireframe graphics of Wizardry, whose dungeon halls sport nothing but empty blackness. However, the towns fare the worst, channeling strong Wizardry vibes, but with instead black and white brick-layered walls. The only wall decorations are torches lining the hallways and blue doors. The dungeons hidden underneath, or the caves outside, are yellowish with tints of green, with white gated entryways with an off-colored white. There are no physical NPCs, so don't expect visions of a bustling tavern or robed worshippers in the hollowed halls of the temples. Statues and towns from the outside are invisible as well, leaving much to the imagination. The only instances that have physical place, person, or creature are seen are castles, the lords inside, and anytime you engage in combat. For a brief moment, the leading enemy of the pack will flash on screen before the player is transported to a drab combat screen. Looking more like a business document found on the office computer of its era, we get purely text, with a list of monsters, your party, and commands. Same for the inventory and character stats. None of this changes with the Commodore 64 port as well, save for some slight variation aesthetically, which was common among different versions of the same game, as color palettes change from system to system. Here, Might&magic pales in comparison to its closest competitor, Bard's Tale, which provided animated enemies and a more colorful combat screen. The Commodore 64 was also an 8-bit machine like the Apple II, but otherwise technically superior with a dedicated graphics card, 64 kilobytes of memory, and a faster CPU. But despite these improvements, what we got on the Commodore is mostly what we got on the Apple II. On the Commodore, things look a bit better, considering the technical advantages. We get a UI with some color variety, with a gray character sheet and a teal sidebar. Mountains have a questionable color, a pukey yellow-brown topped with white and red. Forests look mostly the same, but with white and red soil. The frozen Alps receive quite the peculiar selection of purple. And the oceans actually look the best, with some pretty good resolution for those waves. Overall, the resolution is better, producing a sharper image with less blurring. And the DOS version largely emulates both the Commodore 64 and Apple II in artistic design. New World Computing opted to hew close to the original, instead of taking the opportunity for a graphical facelift like its contemporary Bard's Tale had done. The original Bard's Tale on both the Commodore 64 and Apple II certainly looked good, but came with a terribly small travel window and an interface full of text and dead space. But the ports to DOS for IBM systems in 1987 gave us a much improved world, bristling with greater details and a fancier UI, making for one of the best looking RPGs in its day. In comparison, Might&magic's port for the DOS failed to improve much on its otherwise simple world. UK's Ace magazine noted this in their 1987 review for the DOS release, spending much of the review comparing the game to Bard's Tale, which they clearly had preference for. They still rated Might&magic highly, but were disappointed by the lack of a graphical upgrade that Bard's Tale on the other hand had received. Now, depending on the graphics adapter one had, a player could experience two quite different color palettes. The computer graphics adapter for IBM, first released in 1981, used color artificing like the Apple II, and because of this, players got a similarly produced blurry image when utilizing a composite connection. But this could produce more color depth. For Might&magic, we get a rather common color palette for CGA games of its time, a lot of purple and teal. If using an RGBI display, things look significantly sharper, but with a tad less color variation. In 1984, the enhanced graphics adapter was released and produced up to 16 colors on several resolutions, without the color fringe effect, and producing a more diverse range of colors for the DOS port. It's this version as found on Google Games, and the very same version I completed my first run on, although I did do a second playthrough using CGA, utilizing DOSBox X, so the color palette will change a bit as we make our way through the game itself. The sound between these versions isn't much to write home about. The game sports an opening tune with little variation between the DOS and Commodore versions. There are also tunes for when a battle ends in victory, or death as well. And traveling about can trigger a few boops and blaring noises. A number of which that are rather obnoxious, but otherwise these are games you may want to play on mute. You may notice an absence of the Apple II. That's because the original version lacked any music, opting for only a few beeps when interacting with the world. But this does make the Apple II version the most tolerable, even if it lacks improved resolution when it comes to the game's graphics. There seems to have been plans to update Might&magic significantly, both in the sound and graphics department. According to Japanese magazine Login, or at least from what I could translate, there appears to have been an intention to port Might&magic to the Apple II GS, Atari ST, and Amiga, and to take advantage of the superior hardware. But of all the planned ports for 1988, only the Macintosh was released, and afterwards, the small studio put their energy into the sequel. We'll cover the Macintosh version in more detail later, since it too, like the Japanese variants, is quite different in both user interface and graphics. The best we could do today to improve the DOS version is the graphics overhaul mod, made by the Dark Raider and lag.com, which added shading for dynamic detail for both the environment and the monsters. The mod clearly took inspiration from several ports we'll discuss later, particularly the mountains and the new title screen. This mod can be enjoyed in either EGA or CGA, depending on your color preference. Role-playing games in the 80s certainly loved their mazes in combat. Less focused on the actual role-playing part, and more an emphasis on the mechanics. They steered themselves towards combat as an answer to most problems, and most problems just happen to be a bad guy trying to kill you. Might&magic, being the younger sibling of both Ultima and Wizardry, shared many of these common features. The game is heavy in combat, a world overflowing with fantastical creatures, occupying every forest, mountain range, and curiously, every town. It makes you wonder how anyone can live in these towns, considering just stepping outside any door could guarantee death. And much like, say, Wizardry, Might&magic has its own infatuation with mazes, albeit a little more varied. But unlike Wizardry, which has a singular dungeon, the whole map here is a maze. And within this maze-like world are towns, castles, and caves that are also mazes, and sometimes you'll even be transported to otherworldly mazes. It's mazeception, mazes within mazes within mazes. The Wizardry DNA may be written all over Might&magic, but Van Caneghem had a vision for something larger than Wizardry. A whole world that made exploration a central theme. A true open-world experience. Immersive and wondrous. But he also wanted this theme to exist in combination with his other love, puzzles. I noted earlier how Scorpia praised the game for abstaining from the usual goal, defeating an evil warlord or sorcerer at the end of the game. Instead, a mystery is afoot, and you'll have to put on your investigative cap to uncover the truth. The world is littered with tricks to overcome when navigating the multitude of mazes, and clues to guide you from one quest to the next. An explorer's spirit is necessary to uncover every nook and cranny, peeling back slowly every layer of the mystery, until you eventually reach your goal, the inner sanctum. The world is a mix of traditional D&D fantasy with elements of Greek and Roman history. It should be noted that Van Caneghem's wife at the time, Michaela Van Caneghem, played a role in helping to conceive the world and its history, being the only other member of New World Computing during the game's development. So expect to be hunting monsters of Greek legend as you venture forth, But before one can even get to the fighting, plundering, and exploring, a player will have to create a party, select their respective races, classes, and gender. Much of what we will review will be familiar, since these elements of the game are common to any RPG. But in 1986, Might&magic did a few novel things to differentiate itself, establishing itself as a must-have for any RPG fan. To best get a grip of what I mean, we'll want to cover the basics first. Before you boot up your first adventure, you'll want to consult the manual. It received high praise from critics for its detail, and was considered one of the better manuals of its time. It gives you everything you need to know from classes to races to alignment to spells and even tips on mapping. It's also popular with some rather goofy artwork. The manual's art, created by artist Vincent DeQuattro, has an array of characters sporting some silly expressions and awkward stances. Even the more serious panels, everyone looks especially cartoonish. In-game, the world lacks much of that would convey the silliness that later releases have better emphasized. A cartoonish humor that differentiates the series from other more serious franchises. Because of the lack of visible NPCs, what humor the game sports is conveyed through text. Instead, the best representation of the world's weirdness is relegated to the manual's art. After you've acquainted yourself with the manual, you'll be ready to begin the game. But you may have a bit of a jarring start. Scorpia know the beginning of the game is quite difficult, and for first-timers, it is a bit of a hard start. The game does not have a difficulty to choose from, but you can make the start a bit harder, or easier depending on your party. If you choose to pre-generate a party, you'll receive a balanced selection of characters who will come better equipped than the newly created band of heroes. The knight will come with a shield and the archer a sling. You'll also begin with some gold in your pockets, approximately 200. Past that, everyone comes equipped with nothing but clubs. It isn't much, and only marginally better than a new party, but it's something. The advantages of creating a new party is the control you'll have over what your party members can specialize in. You can fabricate difficulty with your own challenges, such as creating a squad full of sorcerers, but I would not recommend it, at least not on your first playthrough. Instead, a well-balanced party will suffice best. You have 6 slots, allowing you to have one class of each in your party, which will cover all your bases. You'll roll a die to distribute stats. Each stat will have to cross a high enough threshold to make a class option available. For example, high might will afford you the opportunity to recruit a knight, whereas high intellect will offer the sorcerer. It's a standard method of character creation from the era, with no manual control over stat distribution, so you'll have to subject yourself to a lot of rolls to get the ideal hero. Once your party members are created, they are slotted into the starting town's inn, Sorpical. You simply have to pull up the list and select the party members. Overall, Might&magic's entire setup phase is incredibly user-friendly. Speaking of statistics, the standard RPG palette applies here. You have a total of 7 vital statistics: intellect, might, personality, endurance, speed, accuracy, and luck. Intellect dictates spell points for sorcerers and archers, might for how much damage one can deal, personality commands the spell points for clerics and paladins, endurance determines hit points, and speed determines a character's armor class in the order of combat during battle, with the fastest character going first. Accuracy is important for precision of projectiles, and luck gives the party member a random chance of succeeding at any given task. As for classes, well, they are quite standard as well. A knight is a frontline warrior who specializes in melee combat, capable of using any weapon or armor type, and typically highest in HP. A paladin who can utilize any armor or weapons, and if high enough level can utilize lower level cleric spells. An archer who specializes in projectiles. They can also use lower level sorcerer spells when they level up enough. The cleric, who will be the party healer with some decent melee attacks and offensive magic. The sorcerer, the party's major damage dealer with powerful offensive magic to damage and stun opponents. And the robber, who is essential to picking locks on doors and chests. Note, outside the knight and paladin, other classes are relegated to using weaker weapons and armor. For example, the sorcerer can only wear nothing but a robe, or the robber, limited to lighter armor, daggers, and shorter swords. This is also one of the first RPGs to tangibly incorporate gender into the game's mechanics. You are free to choose either female or male, but the choice between either doesn't have much impact on your journey, save for one town, Portsmouth. Going with only a male party will create problems when visiting, a town full of voluptuous women ruled over by a succubus. When in this town, male characters will have their health drained from them, severely reducing their HP, and making combat much more difficult. Although there's a gender-swapping fountain nearby you can take advantage of to bypass this. Race has limited impact as well. so don't feel limited to pairing a class with any of the 5 races. However, the races do have some negative and positive effects on stat distribution. After selecting a race, your stats will change. Say you created a knight but then chose an elf. You'll lose 1 point in both might and endurance but gain 1 in intellect, a stat that is useless to a knight. If you wish to eke out the best start you can get, it would be best to choose, say, a half-orc for a knight since they gain a point in both might and endurance. Unfortunately, and mysteriously, the manual fails to note what stats are affected by what race, so you have to look them up online. The last of your choices will be alignment. Like the others, the impact is quite minimal, but you can choose to be good, evil, or neutral. It impacts what armor, items, and weapons you can use, and what areas you may be able to enter. For example, a character cannot use a weapon with the opposite alignment, making some powerful blades or axes or other weapons only available to good or evil characters. A neutral character can enter any alignment-restricted location, but cannot use alignment-restricted items. Sometimes an encounter with a certain spell can switch alignments, but you can restore your alignment by visiting a temple and consulting with the healers. After this final choice has been made, congratulations, you have created your first character. Do this 5 more times and you have a party. There is one last characteristic though. However, it's one you'll have no control over. Your party members start quite young, at the age of 18, but as time passes, they too will grow older. As your party members age, statistics will eventually depreciate, and after age 80, they can die in their sleep while resting. This would put a time restraint on the player, but Van Canegum incorporated a rejuvenation spell your cleric will learn when they hit their 6th level of spells, allowing them to shave off anywhere from 1 to 10 years of age. It won't make you beautifully youthful in one cast, but nothing is stopping you from casting the spell repeatedly. But with reward comes potential risk, a feature that will become common in later Might&magic games. The spell could have the opposite effect, aging you instead, so casting can become a pendulum swing between reward and failure. Naturally, you'll be hoping the pendulum swings more towards youth, rather than an early date with the Reaper. Magic is fairly simple in Might&magic. Your sorcerer can learn more spells as they level up, unlocking more useful and powerful spells such as Fly, which will allow you to fast travel anywhere, or Acid Rain, which, as you may well guess, allows you to rain down acid on your foes, damaging every monster you're engaged with. Some spells offer protection buffs to your party, like Leather Skin to improve the party's armor, and one of the most powerful of all buffs, the Power Shield, which reduces all incoming damage to your party by half. Spells work no different for the cleric, who has both offensive and healing magic, such as Magic Dispel, Condition Removal, and protection spells to guard against various elements. Or offensive attacks like Deadly Swarm that casts out a swarm of bees to assault multiple enemies at once, or condition casting like Blindness to weaken an enemy's accuracy, or Silence to snuff out spell casting. Condition casting extends to your own party as well. Buff spells like Heroism will improve character statistics, improving HP by 6 points and temporarily level scale a character by 2. Both of your magic casters are essential. The cleric to protect, heal, and buff your party, and strategically weaken your enemies, while the sorcerer specializes in deadly offensive magic, and ability spells to overcome obstacles and allow your party to fast travel anywhere in the world. Your ranger and paladin double as spellcasters as well, the ranger specializing in sorcerer magic and the paladin serving as a minor cleric. However, neither can unlock their total respective library of spells that their more pure counterparts can. They'll always be stuck with the weaker options, but both serve as support casters, and in combination with both the cleric and the sorcerer, can become an overwhelming force. Despite the game sporting a total of 94 spells, 47 for both your cleric and sorcerer, you'll likely be leaning on a prime selection of spells that will prove to be most reliable. There is no guarantee an offensive spell will land or a debuff will succeed, and unfortunately, some seem to fail most of the time. Silence may prove often to be unreliable, while Paralysis has mixed results. There isn't an explainer in the manual, and especially not in the game, why some spells work more often than others. Some enemies certainly have resistances to specific spells, but even when there are none, some spells will fail more often than they should. Over time, you'll learn which spells to rely on the most. There is one last thing you'll need to be a successful spellcaster. To cast spells, you'll need gems, the fuel for magic and Barn. Spellcasting can be more costly because of this mechanic, since spell points still play a role as they do in other titles of the era, so you'll be pulling on 2 limited resources. However, not all spells require gems, but even then, you'll still be spending those precious spell points. If you are depleted entirely on spell points, you can't cast at all, even if you have an ample amount of gems. But luckily, spell points can be restored simply by resting, but gems can only be found through scavenging after battle. You'll need to stay abreast of each resource to ensure you can survive some particularly harrowing scenarios. And remember, when hunting for gems, be sure to search the current square you are on after a victorious battle. If you leave and return later, the items the monsters dropped will disappear. This will also be the same way you can find gold and other items like armor and weapons. And speaking of weapons and armor, the game comes with a vast array of each, and other wearables from cloaks to boots to pillage from the corpses of your enemies or buy at the town's blacksmiths. They range from axes to swords to bows to staffs, plated armor, and more. Most weapons come with basic names with merely a +1 or a +2 indicating if a weapon is more powerful than another of the same type. If it comes with special features, it will be noted in its name, like Thunderhammer or Sword of Magic. The same can be said of armor, shields, and wearables that include rings, cloaks, boots, belts, and more, all of which can boost different stats for your party members, including your armor class, which ranges from a ranking of 0 to 30. The better the armor, the higher the rating. Consumables can be found on the bodies of enemies or purchased from shops, with potions that temporarily improve your might to knowledge books to boost your intelligence. With that being said, I often unintentionally abstain from using consumables since I found leveling up and spell use is sufficient enough to overcome any battle, resulting in me forgetting I had a might, skill, or magic potion in my inventory. Although consumables offer you an edge, you don't need them to beat the game, at least not the main quests. This changes with the sequel, Gates to Another World, where consumables play a much larger role and feel essential to overcoming grueling encounters. Whereas for the original, they may as well just end up cluttering your inventory space. There's also tools that can be found, like grappling hooks and ropes that can, I imagine, be used to overcome obstacles, but I never found myself needing to use them, nor did the game indicate at any point that said items were necessary. Besides, any obstacle you may encounter may be easily dealt with using a spell. Overall, the game has hundreds of items to find or purchase, grossly outnumbering other RPGs of its era, and a pain to organize in a menu system that lacks mouse controls. To trade between members of your party, you'll need to initiate trades through a multi-layer selection process, indicating both the party member and the category of item to trade. Each member can carry 6 items in their backpack. In combination, the entire party has a decent carrying capacity, but over time as you pick up more and more items from the corpses of your fallen foes, you have to visit merchants to sell the excess or brazenly pollute by disposing them in a nearby bush. Once disposed though, you can't pick them back up. They are gone forever. Same goes for any quest items you need, so don't fat finger your inventory management or you'll induce soul-burning rage. Any modern open-world role-playing game is expected to offer hundreds of hours of game time, with numerous side quests to pursue, and Might&magic, an early immersive non-linear experience, helped introduce this modern template in the young years of PC gaming. They even bragged about it in this ad featured in Computer Gaming World, proclaiming the whole experience was more than anything else you've encountered, and even taking a shot at a known competitor at the time. The ad states the following: more monsters, more spells, more speed, more psychology, and even more cartography than the best-selling fantasy game we all know the name of. If you're to be so bold to talk smack, you might as well name the game. I imagine they were referring to Bard's Tale, which is known to have been the best-selling CRPG of the 80s. The genre was very much in its infancy by the time Might&magic entered the stage, but the 80s were an era filled with modern mechanics taking shape across an array of games, building on one another and experimenting with unique ideas. If anyone were to play a multitude of the 80s library of RPGs, they'd find very familiar mechanics, even if they are clunkier iterations of modern experiences. One of the major differentiating elements of Might&magic was the sheer size of its world, and seen through the eyes of your adventurers. Perspective changes the gamer's experience, and Van Caneghem understood this. He explained in his interview with Matt Barton that he had 2 visions for the game, one from a tactical viewpoint and another from a first-person perspective. He settled on the first-person perspective because he found it to be more immersive. With that crucial decision, in combination with the game's size and scope, we received one of the earliest templates for a beloved and particular style within the role-playing space, something that would become synonymous with later series like Fallout, Elder Scrolls, or Vampire the Masquerade. But the open-world template wasn't new by the time Secret of the Inner Sanctum stepped into the ring. Several games from a top-down perspective already gave gamers a world to wander. The Ultima series is the most famous example of sprawling oceans, fields, and mountain ranges, as well as a number of clones that came after, like Questron or Exifus. In 1985, several notable first-person RPGs appeared, a few being early innovators that I've mentioned several times already, Bard's Tale and Alternate Reality. But the size of both were relegated to a single city or town, and unlike Might&magic, were more linear in quest design. Might&magic's world dwarfed both Bard's Tale and Alternate Reality, giving players a true non-linear experience in a full-fledged land populated with a plethora of dungeons, towns, castles, and various ecosystems. Certainly games have grown to be much larger since, but in 1986, Might&magic had few contenders. You can gain a sense of the game's size by peering at its map, a hand-drawn and detailed illustration of Varn that came packaged with the game. Illustrated by Jim Krogel of West End Studios, the map provides an accurate depiction of Varn, and can be a useful tool to help you navigate from one location to another. In-game, the world is a strict grid detail of repetitive 2D panels, a suitable enough depiction of your environment, but ultimately, a maze that does more to confuse than to clarify. But the map will give you a richer idea of what this world is supposed to look like, had graphics afforded such luxuries in the 1980s. Exploring this map, we can note several major areas. Your starting town Sorpical lies in the center, embraced by dense forestry that populates the Pleasant Valley, an ironic name for a place swarming with so many violent beasts. To the southwest lays the Sea of Varn, peppered with islands rich in foliage. To the southeast, a mass of dragon lords over the marshlands. And to the north of this foggy bog, we witness an obstinate rock face, holding fast against the invading desert. To the west, the frozen mountains of despair guard the ancient glacier, a vast, frigid snowscape. And I hope you did not miss the obvious nod to what had been the already planned sequel, Gates to Another World. But to a first-time player in 1986, I'm sure this gated archway raised questions. We'll talk more on this a bit later when we discuss the primary quest. Varn's geography is well labeled, with every mountain range, the forest, the hill named. Every ecosystem seen on the map can be traveled to, and each brimming with opportunity for adventure. Caves lay hidden at the base of mountain faces, and monster-infested strongholds lay nestled in the trees, and dank dungeons hide dangerous terrors. You'll notice many of these forts and caves of interest are not marked on the map. They can only be discovered through exploration. You'll discover much of the world through the story, but to thoroughly uncover every quest, you need to explore far and wide. The map also notes every major town, 5 in total: Sorpical, Algory, Dusk, Erloquin, and Portsmouth. The towns are strategically placed so each major sector of the map, from east to west, from north to south, has a town within reach for saving and replenishing supplies. On the map, they look to be far removed from one another, but in-game I found traveling from one town to the next to be quite breezy. It's a big game for 1986, but not so much for the modern day. As you travel between these towns, you'll grow accustomed to the pathways between them, committing the way by memory. Several have clear pathways laid out. RPGs often defied reality in the 1980s, but they were making strides in grounding some mechanics in reality. You'll note some of that here in Varn. The pathways make travel practical, as pathways would need to be for traders, emissaries, and adventurers. Signposts will appear on occasion, noting the nearest town and telling you which direction and how many grid spaces you are removed from the said location. Just follow the instructions to the T and you're home free. With reliable roads, signposts, and a detailed map, you can navigate the world with some ease. The memory only gets you so far, and auto-mapping in RPGs isn't a feature to exist yet, at least not until 1988 when Might&magic 2 Gates to Another World adds the feature that has since become a standard for the genre. For the first Might&magic, mapping is old school. If you want to really dig deep into every crevice of Varn, you'll have to sharpen your cartography skills and bust out the graph paper. To gain a better grip with your new stomping grounds, you can split the map up into respective sectors. The website Old Games gives us a pretty solid look at what this looks like with a gridded map. Note its 5 sectors across both the X and Y axis, appropriately labeled alphabetically and numerically, giving us a name to each respective section so we can easily keep track of what sector we are in. This is important when fast traveling with the fly spells, since it will ask you for both the respective letter and number of the sector you wish to travel to. Now, old games may give us a detailed map of each sector, but for the most authentic experience, mapping yourself will be the best bet. And unlike online maps, mapping helps you commit the sectors to memory. Much of the world may look quite samey, but you'd be surprised just how well you can learn the world's layout when putting pen to paper. If you are not familiar with mapping, know it was a rather central gameplay mechanic in early role-playing games, generating a slow unraveling of the world's mystery through careful note-taking and exploration, making for a methodical experience rather than skipping from one objective to the next like more modern open-world games, where auto maps generate quest markers to handhold a player from one objective to the next. Personally, in my playthrough, I started out with wandering, hoping to memorize enough of the world through sheer will, which worked up to a point until mapping became a necessity. Busting out the graph paper, I slowly etched in every square, bit by bit, noting dense structures like mountains that I couldn't pass through with solid lines, while dotted lines indicated a square I could freely pass through despite a panel present. These were usually forests or swamps. But after mapping several sectors, burnout did set in, as mapping bogged me down and slowed quest progression. I eventually pulled maps offline to streamline the experience. I guess I'm not above a little bit of hand-holding myself. During my second playthrough, I had more success using the map that came with the game, and using signposts and a location spell, which communicates the sector and grid square you are in, to keep me abreast of where I was at any point in the overworld. Granted, I already have familiarity with sections of the map due to my first playthrough, but I relied on fast travel to often ease the experience, skipping whole sectors I would otherwise have to travel through. Using the map's geographical landmarks, this time I was able to get around with some trouble, but otherwise found the method to be doable. I felt like some frontiersman in the wild with nothing but a dusty map to guide my way, using the few environmental changes in my compass to keep track of where I was at any point. For example, say I wanted to travel from Sorpical to Algery. By looking at the map, I could tell Algery is southeast of Sorpical. A paved road can take me south where I meet a signpost of the Southern Pass. To the east is the marshlands, which we will need to travel through to get to Algery. From the signpost, I would need to turn left, and trusting the road, I will eventually happen upon another signpost that will tell me Algery lies south. But no path lies to the south to safely guide me there. Instead, I'll have to travel through the haunted marsh, 9 grid spaces to be exact, as the signpost noted, and hope to not stumble upon any undead. Following both the map and the signposts, I was able to find my way to Algery, without too much trouble. In Varn, you'll also need to keep abreast of traps integrated into the natural landscape, a clear carryover from wizardry, but instead of a well-crafted dungeon with carefully laid traps and tricks, Van Canegum integrates some of the traps into Varn in a way that feels natural. Like a false wall that prevents escape in wizardry would instead be an avalanche in Might&magic. It's old tricks reimagined, and for the genre's natural evolution to an open world. It taps into the immersion Van Canegum aimed for because an expedition through the world can't be complete with just monsters that hound you. You have to learn to be a survivalist. The first decision you make regarding combat starts when you load into the inn. At the inn, you select which spot each member will take in the party formation. The higher up the list, the greater likelihood they can engage in hand-to-hand combat. Those in the first 2 slots will always be within striking distance of the enemy, but the formation will depend on the battlefield. The wider the battlefield, the more your party members can engage directly with the enemy. For example, in a narrow hallway, the formation is 3 rows deep, 2 members occupying each row. Naturally, the first row will always be within melee range. The rest will be backline participants, using projectiles and spells. The further back a party member is, the harder they are to reach, and thus more protected. Meaning the third row is best saved for your heroes with the weakest defense, like magic casters. If the battlefield is a bit larger, then perhaps party members occupying the 3rd and 4th slot can engage in combat, creating a larger front line, but also exposing those members to melee combat as well too. But instead, if you were to be outside, then every member of your party can be exposed to melee, so be vigilant in casting healing and protection spells to keep your spellcasters and thieves alive. Later, you can learn a spell that can even widen the battlefield, allowing for more members of your party to participate in melee, if that is a suitable strategy for your party's makeup. This is all quite different from Wizardry or Bard's Tale, which had a fixed 2-line formation, with the first 3 members always serving as the front line, thus more safely protecting your backline from close quarters combat. But like those other games, choosing your order is important to ensure success in more battles, even if the formation is ever shifting, so don't make your sorcerers a permanent fixture of your front line. So now you've got your list figured out and you've ventured out of the inn, on the hunt for monsters. You won't have to look far, combat will find you, and randomly, except for those squares that will always trigger combat. These are called fixed encounters, and good ones to keep tabs on for farming XP. When stumbling upon your first group of enemies, you'll be greeted with a brief image of the monster leading the pack. Once you've entered the battle screen, you'll then see the business doc-like screen I noted earlier. It's not much to look at, but it does give you a detailed breakdown of everything you need to know. The list of monsters appear in the center of the screen, and in the order in which they will attack. Combat is turn-based, and so who goes first will be dictated by speed, with the fastest characters going first. This order can change as monsters will sometimes shift places within their squad, moving monsters unharmed by previous attacks up front, thus whittling down the enemy's numbers a bit more taxing. The monsters that move from the front to the back may not be protected by that new front line, meaning you can only reach them with projectiles and spells. To the left you will notice numbers 1 through 6. This represents your squad, and each number is representative of their place within your formation. The number that is highlighted represents the member of your party whose turn is currently up. Some of these numbers will have a plus symbol next to them and others will not. Those with the plus symbol are capable of engaging in melee combat with the enemy. Those not within melee range are still capable of using ranged attacks, such as magical projectiles, slings, crossbows, or bows. Below your party members' names, you'll notice a list of hotkeys you can use to attack. Exchange an item with a party member, block, use an item, retreat, or cast. Attack automatically attacks the first enemy listed, whereas fight allows you to choose. Who you can choose depends if you can reach them or not. Otherwise, you have to use a ranged ability, if your hero has the option. Block will increase your defense for a turn, reducing damage, and use an item as self-explanatory, allowing you to, say, knock back a potion for an advantage in battle. Retreating succeeds more often before a fight, if you can manage to surprise a group of monsters. You could always surrender as well, but your gold, food, and items may be confiscated, and your party will be transported to a more dangerous area of the map. Lastly, there is Bribe, available only before battle. Depending on the monster type, you can offer them money to resolve things peacefully. I imagine this works on humanoid or intelligent creatures, but I can't say for sure because I hardly experimented with it. You want my money, you'll have to pry it from my cold dead hands. Enemies can also cast spells and conditions like sleep, paralysis, or even turn you into stone. If you are affected by a condition, then an asterisk will appear next to one of your party members' names. If a party member reaches 0 HP, you have a chance to save them. They first enter a state of unconsciousness. If you can manage to heal your hero, they will regain consciousness. If the battle is finished, you can rest instead and achieve the same result. Enough time passes and your hero will die, in which case you have to visit a temple to revive him. The temple is a place for healing as well, but depending on the condition you are trying to resolve, costs will vary. Merely healing is cheaper than bringing someone back to life. Cost is highest if a party member has been instead eradicated, a condition worse than death, total obliteration. Not a morsel of flesh remains. Sometimes monsters will receive a handicap, boosting their speed. This handicap can also exist for your party as well. A monster plus means a handicap for the party of enemies, and a party plus means a handicap for you and your party of heroes. The manual doesn't state how these handicaps are determined. Perhaps your speed plays a role. Turn-based combat often requires planning, but I found careful coordination to mostly be a thing early game, when your party is weak and your spell options are limited. Once you gain enough levels and a plethora of powerful spells open up to you, and your party is donning heavier armor and deadlier weapons, then combat becomes a repetitive affair. I mentioned earlier how you'll end up leaning on a small selection of reliable spells. In most combat scenarios, it will be 4 or 5 spells you'll be casting often, while the rest of your party swings and shoots arrows until the enemy is dead. Besides the moments you pause to calculate who you need to cast a healing spell for, you'll find these affairs pass quickly, save for those fights of a group of high-level dragons or something of equal measure. For those, you'll still want to tread carefully. But combat comes often, so the excitement of the ordeal wears thin. If you are in need of a break, one spell, Guard Dog, can grant you some reprieve, specifically from surprise attacks as you explore the world. However, combat will become the most reliable way to level up. Although quests earn you experience points as well, they are finite in number, whereas combat is not. Even fixed encounters restart, making them ideal for grinding. Like other old-school RPGs, you'll be engaged in an hours-long affair of combat to eke up the next level, incrementally becoming powerful enough to tackle larger monsters, and thus, more experience. But speaking of quests, these adventures are probably the second feature outside the size of the world that differentiates Might&magic from most of its competition, because the game comes packed with quests to pursue. The first Might&magic wasn't just famous for the size of its world, but also the amount of quests packed into it. You can ignore the main quest from the start if you wish, and venture into the unknown wild and start any side quests you can manage, or dungeon dive into any cave you discover. The game is completely non-linear. You are the author of your own adventure. Side quests can be split into 2 categories. Ones the game explicitly references as side quests, given by different lords in the land, of which there are 3, and those that you stumble upon yourself out in the world. I label the latter as side quests even though the game doesn't, mostly because I wouldn't know what else to call them. This can be a dungeon with puzzles to solve that hides treasure, or the endless arena squirreled away under Sorpical, the strange man who tasks you to climb several trees for some reason, or the prisoners you can free from every castle that will eventually reward you with experience points, if you can find the ominous statue of judgment, that is. You can even rob a town, although it's not recommended unless your party is ready to manage a very difficult fight. As for explicit side quests, you'll need a merchant pass, found on the corpses of caravanners strewn about in the Middle Grove, a forested area north of Sorpical. After fighting off the very monsters who likely killed the caravanners and retrieving the key, then you are able to commune with the lords. Most of the quests they give you are either fetching an item, scouting a location, or killing a powerful monster. Their quests are substantially shallow, but several will provide you clues or even directly put you on the path for your main quests. Scorpia claims all these are necessary to complete to finish the main quest, but this isn't actually true. None are required to finish the story, but unless you found hints elsewhere or got lucky wandering, then doing some of these quests will be of immense aid. You can only do the Lord's quest one at a time. If you wish to abandon one and pick up another, you have to do a curious thing: cast a spell to remove a quest. Otherwise, you gotta stick to the quest you got. Once finished, you can return to the Lord and they'll give you another quest, usually harder than the last. For example, Lord Hacker's quest line started with me simply fetching him a vegetable which I picked up from a vendor in Sorpical, but the final quest saw me diving into the depths of a trap-riddled, monster-infested lair on the hunt for none other than Medusa. Yes, that Medusa, the snake-headed myth of Greek history. Finding the lair is a task unto itself, nestled in an unnamed mountain range south of Ravenswood. Once inside, you'll have to check every door before lockpicking or risk getting wrecked by a magic trap. Different squares are trapped as well, so levitating, jumping, or teleporting over them will be necessary. Her lair is far removed from a save point, so dying here will set you back quite a bit. If you are a high enough level, you may have the Etherealize spell, which allows you to phase through walls, skipping the hardest sections of the lair. Honestly, the spell may trivialize the challenge maybe too much. If you can survive Medusa's traps, minions, especially the tough-as-nails Basilisk, then you could tackle the Snake Queen herself. If you manage to kill her, take her head with you, and return as a champion, you can collect your prize. Lord Hacker will reward you handsomely with experience. Every quest gives you XP, and the further along the quest line you are, the more you're able to earn. Most leveling will still come through combat though, but that changes more with the sequel, where quests will play a bigger role in leveling up your character. But for now, They serve as extra padding. The world is brimming of opportunity, events, and treasure. It has the hallmarks of Skyrim or Cyberpunk, but with all the jank of the 1980s. There's no hand-holding here. You'll uncover much of the world through obscure hints pasted on walls and carved in the statues and good old exploring. Since there's so little in way of visual detail, it's the tidbits of text that will contextualize the world. For example, Portsmouth's vendors are all manned by beautiful women save for the temple, which has been desecrated. Clearly, something is afoot, and certainly, there is. One such quest you can pursue is freeing the town from a succubus who lays hidden behind a false wall, but she is a very difficult challenge to overcome, so you'll have to come ready. In Dusk, located on the far side of the invading desert, every encounter is with a ghostly apparition, or some sort of half-dead citizen. A statue early in the game notes how Dusk was once lost, and only recently rediscovered. Nonetheless, a town full of undead or nearly dead residents, located within a brutal desert, indicates that there is more story here than meets the eye. But unfortunately, the game only offers threads of detail, so don't expect to learn much more about Dusk other than what you initially encountered. Same goes for every other town as well. Some we learn even less. For example, Algery is a town nestled in the haunted marshland, and its residents are grotesque creatures. Hardly much story to pick at here, but the city's inhabitants do fit the environment. The only town that doesn't seem to have much of a trope is Erlequin, which is the most normal of the bunch. No half-dead residents here or busty maidens, just normal people doing normal things. The game wants you to learn of Varn through a magnifying glass, closely examining its details to learn more about what is exactly happening in this world. But what you'll see instead is how much depth it actually lacks. You'll never get to the heart of the story of any town or region. There's a lot to see and do, but ultimately, it's just a shallow world. The game providing a little narrative wasn't uncommon for the era. Story often took a back seat to gameplay, serving a little more than giving the player a goal to work towards. However, titles would use the manual as a place to flesh out the world and give players some history and story, giving some narrative meat to a chronicle that otherwise subsisted on the bare minimum. But Might&magic's manual doesn't even give players background on the main story. It's a world that is meant to be discovered, not read after all. All we know is the title. There's an inner sanctum, and with it, a secret to uncover. This narrative approach is rather unique during the time, a narrative that is more than just a big bad guy trying to end the world, and instead giving you a mystery to resolve. The game serves as one big puzzle. To get started on this mystery, exploring your starting town, Sorpical, will be key. I mentioned earlier how there's clues scattered around the world, and some of those are on statues, while Sorpical has a number of statues that you can read, suggesting potential side quests and some providing essential hints for the main adventure. The quest starts you off simple enough, delivering scrolls and finding specific NPCs. If you explore the dungeon under Sorpical, hidden in dark recesses, you will find an old man who will give you a scroll to deliver. This will introduce you to another town, Erlequin, and the wizard you are tasked to seek, Agar. After delivering the scroll, Agar will send you off to find another resident of Varn, Telgaron, and then Telgaron will send you off again, this time to find two people of interest, twins in fact, Zom and Zam. After you've dug deep into the dark corners of Algery and Portsmouth to find both, you'll be gifted with two separate hints, and when pieced together, form a coordinate that will take you to a ruby whistle, a necessary item to access the Minotaur's lair. If you did your homework and read all the statues in Sorpical, you'll know where to find this lair, in the Enchanted Forest. From here, the main story becomes a bit more robust. While each town serves as a maze to complicate your first tasks, from here you'll be diving into dungeons with more dangerous monsters, explosive traps, strange and frustrating obstacles, and located further away from any save point. The Minotaur's fortress is frustrating enough, and if you wish you can seek out the Minotaur and kill him, a necessary task for a side quest, but for our primary journey we only need a gold key located at the base of a dog statue. From here you'll be off to discover more mazes, using the clues you find along the way. Whether by sheer luck through exploration or piecing together clues scribbled on the walls or the assistance of the internet, you eventually find your way to the king of the land, Alamar, whose throne has actually been usurped by an imposter. That imposter will be your primary antagonist for the first 5 Might&magic games, Shelton. He's also from outer space, an unusual place of origin for a sword and a sorcery game, but Van Canegum was a Star Trek fan after all, and his world is heavily influenced by Captain Kirk and his spacefaring escapades. You'll first discover this sci-fi twist if you stumble across a crashed spaceship located on the edge of the desert in a crop of trees. An alien will drop a hint that an escaped prisoner has gone to pose as a noble, to blend into the aristocracy of the realm. We don't learn much about Sanctum, but the pose as a noble, a position of such high standing, suggests a creature bent on power. For now, he simply serves as a bump in your road to the inner sanctum. To free the king, you'll have to make your way through an annoying, winding dungeon hidden on the far side of a dense forest brimming with high-level monsters. You'll definitely need to level up for this one. This dungeon is another example of some of the tricks the game throws at you in its strange world. Its circular structure is trapped with teleportation portals that send you back to the start of the dungeon. To figure out which grid space has a trap, you'll have to cast location spells often, which gives you both the longitude and latitude of your position, an annoyingly redundant process. Or you can just save yourself a bunch of pain and misery and look up a marked map online. Once you find the king, you'll discover he is held in a force field and will beg you to expose the fraud upon the throne with a mysterious artifact known as the Eye of Goros, which he will bestow upon you. Returning to the throne room of the king's castle, you can oust the imposter and return the king to his rightful seat. But not before the imposter, Sanctum, casts you off to another maze. This one called the Soul Maze. After clawing your way out of this new maze and returning to the true king, now sitting comfortably upon his throne, he will task you with finding the inner sanctum, but oddly, without any real reason given. But nonetheless, off you go, to tackle the final stretch of your journey. After enough investigation, you will eventually make your way to the Cross Islands of the Sea of Varn. If you find a hooded figure on one of these islets, you'll be asked to solve a riddle, which is only solvable if each of your party members knows their sign, which is handed out by a gypsy who camps near Sorpical. You'll retrieve the Coral Key, which you'll need to access the inner domain of an ancient god, hidden within the land's volcano, located on the aptly and uncreatively named Volcano Islands. The island is full of fierce natives, women clad in tatters, and chest-bearing men wielding clubs, tasked with protecting the labyrinth at the heart of the island, the Volcano Dungeon. Van Canegum was really reaching for these names. A series of dials lay therein, and turning them all the correct position turns on a teleporter that takes you to the Volcano God. Something about this whole thing is giving Skull Island vibes. The god gives you something unusual, a keycard, if you can answer his riddle. Not exactly a normal thing you expect from an island god. But with keycard in hand, the only thing left now is to travel to the astral plane. If your party has reached a high enough level, then your sorcerer can cast a spell to travel there. The dungeon of the astral plane is certainly the strangest in the game, and for me personally, the most annoying. A pitch black maze with invisible walls. First, you'll need to cast a spell for light, but the extra light will only take you so far. You can see a bit more, but since the background is black and many walls are invisible, the maze still looks to be pitch black half the time, which does not help at all with navigation. And on top of all of that, you're not allowed to cast a location spell to orient yourself, so you'll be constantly lost. The goal here is to find 5 rooms of teleport devices. Mapping is an option, but difficult to do. I found it impossible to know where I was at any given time. So what do I even map exactly? Since you're unable to orient yourself here, random wandering will be your best bet. Hopefully you'll be able to stumble your way into the first teleporter room. Each one you find will send you back to Sorpical, from which you'll have to then re-teleport back to the astral plane and find another room. Re-teleporting after finding the first room will place you in another part of the maze. It regularly placed me in front of one of the teleportation rooms. I'm not sure if I got lucky or not, but this did give me some sense of orientation. I found a map online, but it was useless without being able to figure out where I was in the maze. Now that I could orient myself a bit, the map became more useful. Another useful tool will be the Etherealize spell, which I mentioned earlier, and allows you to move through walls. Since some walls are invisible, you may see the room you can reach, but can't. But with the Etherealize spell, you can bypass those invisible walls to advance more easily. But the game doesn't want to make things too easy for you, so Van Canegum dropped in magic barriers in specific areas. So you'll be casting to check if each square on the grid is a barrier or not, a game of trial and error. As if this dungeon wasn't already annoying enough. Once you have finally found all teleporter rooms, you'll be able to travel to the center of the maze, and use your keycard the Volcano God so graciously gave you to access the final room. Once you've entered, you'll find a man sitting at a collection of screens who will congratulate you on finding him. This is the big surprise at the end. He'll tell you what Varn, the world's name, stands for, which is Vehicular Astropod Research Nacelle. He will request you travel to another Varn and point your party to a teleporter gate, thus setting you up for the sequel, Gateways to Another World. If you remember the archway I mentioned on the map, this is where it pops up in-game. But first you'll be whisked away back to Sorporgal again and granted 500,000 experience points per character, giving you the ripe opportunity to upgrade each character several levels, and leaving you to explore the current Varn at your leisure. I'm not alone in actually being a bit annoyed by this dungeon. Scorpia seemed to agree, finding the dungeon one of the least pleasant portions of this game, even though she loved it otherwise. Despite the problems of this dungeon, it's the ending that seems terribly strange. Learning that your entire world is actually an artificial structure floating through space. The game doesn't note this, but it's actually slab-like in its shape, something revealed later in the franchise. This ending also leaves us with a lot of questions that won't be answered in this game, like who made this structure and what exactly is being researched? Why is there a computer room with a man hanging out in it? The game notes he is a data keeper, but what does that entail exactly? Does he ever leave? Who or what put him there? Why was he tracking your party specifically? And why is your party even being directed to another world? He notes it as a privilege, but why? Why did the king want you to find this place? Did he know something? Who is even the volcano god? Is he an actual god or some artificial creation? What even is this world's religion or religions? The game isn't big on exposition. Instead, as you've experienced, it's big on abstraction, like many RPGs of its era. The world feels a bit untethered to reality, making narrative immersion secondary to gameplay. But credit is due for the unique spins Van Caneghem integrated into his virtual epic, even if the rest of the story leaves much to be desired. While the narrative and world is bare in substance, it does a solid job in leaving mystery to be unraveled by the player and giving players a different ending than what they would normally be used to. Its contribution to the narrative space is at least to some degree important in that regard, and what it does lack can be easily chopped up to the project being mostly a one-man show, and all done in an era where gameplay mattered more than story. But the features of what was to become standards for the genre are here, a large, expansive world with quests and curiosities to pursue. The ending also highlights another important influence, the Twilight Zone. Van Caneghem noted in his interview RPG Codex that his intention was to have a big reveal at the end of the game that would leave an impact on the player. And unusual it was, for 1986 where fantasy games followed typical tropes, such as defeating a big baddie at the end. Might&magic opted for the strange, and also setting the stage for its sequel. A new adventure Van Caneghem has started soon after Secret of the Inner Sanctum, a sequel that would prove to be even more robust, introducing several new and intriguing mechanics. But the lifespan of Secret of the Inner Sanctum was stretched for a number of years beyond 1986, producing a number of interesting ports. We discussed a few earlier that largely copy the original on the Apple II, but both the Mac and Japan received versions that significantly depart from the original, largely aesthetically for some, but also some important gameplay differences for others. In 1988, the Mac will receive its own port, and by far the most unique look of all of them. The Mac was entirely monochrome, designed with office work in mind rather than video games, but black and white in the heyday possessed an ability to produce an exact sharpness. We get a rather beautifully monochromatic world that pops with detail, like a digitized sketch drawing, complete with shading technique that adds depth to every tree, wall, and mountain. But the biggest change of them all was the integrated mouse controls. The Mac, being one of the earlier desktop computers to sport a mouse, gave them a leg up in ease of use. The entire game can be controlled using the mouse, although some things should still be left to the keyboard for the quickness, like movement. The mouse also makes the otherwise clunky inventory management system much easier to navigate. The sound is much improved over its predecessors as well, with a new opening tune to go along with its new and impressive title screen. The game also replaced the obnoxious battle victory music with a short and sweet tune, a definite improvement. Little tunes play at the start of battles as well, or even when a party dies. Overall, the Mac version may be the best version yet, as far as ease of use is concerned. The aesthetic may be good or bad for you depending on taste, but in my opinion, it looks quite good. But it would be the Japanese that would give the series quite a facelift. Japanese developer StarCraft ported the game to 6 systems, all of which look identical, other than some differences for resolution. The opening title screen is particularly cool, with a bright pink background and some Spartan statues hoisting spears in the air, and a new theme song to go along with it. The game is entirely in Japanese with no English translation available, so it's hard to speak much on anything outside of graphics and sound. But the game certainly looks good. Well, mostly. The desert looks a little more than a reddish haze, and the snowy mountains look to be missing all their snow. All the mountains are in fact turned into craggy boulders, looking more like canyons rather than mountain ranges. But the forests and marshlands are quite impressive. But the most impressive difference are the enemy designs. All the enemies have a total redesign. Of all the ports, the look of these enemies are among the best. They have a slick sheen to them, like they were made for a sticker collection. The game also has improved sound effects, and for the first time, music in-game, with 2 notable instrumentals between both the town and the wilderness. Unfortunately, the song outside is, well, rather painful to listen to. This may also be a game that is best muted for this reason alone. The last of the ports came in the 90s, one for the NES and the other for the TurboGrafx. Both are quite different from one another, with the NES opting to hew close to the original in design, while the TurboGrafx version is, well, basically a remake. In 1990, the first of the console ports hit the Nintendo Entertainment System, released initially in Japan, ported by Amusements Company and published by Gekken Inc., and then brought stateside by American Sammy Corporation in 1992. This version saw quite the upgrade, producing one of the best looking versions yet. The initial town, Sorpical, touts an orange color scheme with a bluish-black dungeon. Unless you cast light, then it turns into a neon green. But everything is so visible already, unlike the original, that it pretty much negates the need to cast light. Unfortunately, it may take some time to see what the outside looks like. For a game built on the notion of non-linearity, this variant stalls your party early game, refusing you to leave the gates until your band of heroes are stronger. This is probably why they also added a few rooms in Sorpical, giving you a tab more to explore. But since these halls are just as empty as the original, it's not exactly an exciting venture. This limitation makes early game a boring grind, unless you know the exit in the dungeon, which allows you to bypass this limitation entirely. Exiting, you will note the large and loomy mountains, as mountains should be, unlike the original where they look like farcical imitations. They teem with a goldish hue, an interesting color to choose, while the snow version looks simply like a glacial structure erupting from the earth, not exactly giving the impression your party is in the tundra of the Mountains of Despair. And the invading desert simply looks like lava. Everything may have more detail and color, but oddly the original Western versions artistically were closer to reality in design, even if the mountains had a more diminutive stature. But the trees and oceans do look great. Not to mention the castle's interior received a massive facelift, unlike the towns, which are still plain and redundant with the only changing variable being color, which changes depending on the town you are in, which is better than the original where all towns just sported black and white. NPCs for the first time are present, albeit in a terribly small box. There are still no animations, but it's nice to actually have some people to look at. Monsters also stick around longer, staying throughout the entirety of battle, much like the Japanese PC port. Each monster received a totally new redesign and looked better than the original. I think the computer port's monsters still look the coolest, but these designs certainly have a lot of character to them. Despite being one of the last ports, inventory and party management is the clunkiest in this version. Unlike any of the Japanese or Western ports, there's no always present character list. You have to press the A button and literally sort through each of your characters one by one to check your stats and inventory. Party creation is also quite different. The game also starts you with creating a solo character, who automatically begins as a knight, although you can find an added guild master and Sorpical to change your class. For the rest of your party, you can recruit from a new and larger list of pre-generated characters from the inn. Each town comes with its own set of heroes to choose from, but you have to travel to each in order to recruit them. But much like your starting character, if you're not happy with the class they came with, you'll have to bring them to the guild master. The NES version also comes with its own automap, although you have to trigger a different screen to see it. But it is a welcome addition, so you don't have to use any graph paper to map out the world yourself. Music and sounds have the typical Nintendo charm, with varying tunes for towns, combat, NPCs, and outside world. Compared to their Japanese PC counterparts, these instrumentals are a definite improvement. Overall, the NES version is one of the better ports, and for those who don't speak Japanese, the most accessible, making it the clear choice among all the Japanese ports. The TurboGrafx version was released in 1992. It is so different from the original that it might as well be considered a remake. The game opens with a rather impressive cinematic, establishing a different kind of story. Your party is attacked at sea by a centaur and washed ashore. From there, you venture off to find your assailant and find the inner sanctum along the way. There's no party creation either. Instead, you are given an entire party of humans who each have fixed classes. So the level of freedom is grossly limited, an unfortunate downgrade. However, each party does get their own portrait, and they are pretty good looking. Your party is well balanced, but each member is locked into a preset alignment, restricting their choices of weapons or armor designated to a specific alignment. So any evil party member will be completely unable to use any powerful weapons designated for good characters. It's an incredibly odd choice. You'd think they allow the player to at least choose their own alignment. Despite limiting and odd gameplay choices, the game did overall improve on presentation. Much like the Nintendo version, the town has NPCs that'll pop up when you enter the otherwise empty establishments, and they come with voice acting as well. The monsters also receive a complete redesign. These enemy designs are quite good, and stay present throughout battle in a pretty cool battle screen, where we get a top-down view of a darkened hallway that is populated with a small army of monsters. The world itself is quite detailed, and by far the most impressive of any port. But there are some unusual artistic design choices in the overworld. The desert looks like dead grass, most trees are missing their leaves for some reason, and the snow section is just giant ice walls, looking nothing like the mountains they are supposed to be. I get the impression I am stuck inside some cavernous glacial structure, rather than a mountain range. Same goes for mountains in drier regions, looking like a bunch of men carefully laid some rocks to form some sort of primitive castle wall. The UI mostly copies the layout of its computer counterparts, but with a new addition of the automap. Unlike the NES where you had to trigger a new screen, this one has the automap built into the primary screen, making exploration tremendously easier. However, I noticed each time I left a room and returned, the entire region would restart, requiring me to unveil every inch again, an inexplicably annoying design choice. This version has its host of problems, but it's certainly the most technically impressive version, and the last of the ports for Secret of the Inner Sanctum. Might&magic's first outing had undoubtedly left its indelible mark on the genre, an early non-linear experience that predated the likes of Elder Scrolls and Fallout. Its non-linearity served as a template for what later became the modern open-world adventure, with a robust list of quests and puzzles separating itself from other early competitors. Above all, Might&magic's relevance was noteworthy for its continual development of a rather small subgenre of first-person RPGs, known as blobbers, since the whole crew of heroes were blobbed together and seen from a singular first-person perspective. There were a few that predate Might&magic. Most you should be familiar with by now: Bard's Tale, Alternate Reality, Wizardry, Akalabeth, early Ultima games. Outside the RPG space, there were a few maze games from a first-person perspective, even a French shooter released the same year as Wizardry called Voyager 1. Besides that, there were other smaller RPGs that were basically Wizardry clones, like Swords of Glass or Hell's Temple, most sporting the same wireframe graphics. But the field in 1986 was tiny, leaving room for expansion on the formula. Might&magic was important because, much like Bard's Tale, it served an evolutionary function, taking non-linearity from city streets to a whole world, incorporating a multitude of quests and giving the player an assortment of curiosities to pursue or trouble to stir up, allowing the player to create their own adventure. The first game was a big deal, but the Might&magic series was just beginning its long journey into what would become a decades-long spanning franchise, generating numerous releases populating several genres. But in the 80s, the series marked itself as a stepping point for role-playing games, into grander adventures with ever larger worlds to explore. With the sequel, you would see even more of this, on a bigger scale, with more to do, more quests to pursue, and bigger challenges. To put it simply, a world of more. And with New World Computer growing, now popular with a few friends of Van Canegum's to shoulder the duties of running a video game company, Van Canegum's vision could grow larger, and beyond even Might&magic itself. But that would still be a few more years off before expansion to new frontiers began. In the meantime, the team's focus would be on bringing Gates to Another World to life.